"You'll never get the beach house, Mom. Not in this lifetime." The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Those words from my daughter, Lily, cut deeper than the surgeon's scalpel from my recent hip surgery. I stood there, leaning on my cane, feeling the ocean breeze drift through the open windows of the beach house I'd owned for 30 years. The same house where Lily had built sandcastles, learned to swim, and later, brought her first boyfriend to meet us. Behind Lily stood Marcus, her husband of barely 3 years, arms crossed with a smirk that spoke volumes. His family, the prestigious Hamiltons, stood on my deck like they already owned it, champagne glasses in hand, designer sunglasses perched on perfect noses. The realtor's business card was still on my coffee table, their generous offer spelled out in careful numbers that were insultingly below market value. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood there, feeling the weight of my 72 years pressing down on me, along with the betrayal that felt heavier than all my decades combined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Lily thought today she had erased her mother from the equation. But there was one truth she didn't know, a truth buried in decades of careful planning that would change everything. The sliding glass door closed behind them as they returned to their impromptu future ownership celebration on my deck. I could hear Marcus's father, Judge Hamilton, laughing about renovations they'd make once the old place changes hands. Through the glass, I watched Lily clink glasses with her new family, not once looking back to see if I was still standing there. I made my way slowly to my study, my sanctuary overlooking the dunes. The room where I'd written 3 best-selling novels, where I'd nursed my late husband through his final days, where I'd taught Lily to read. I eased myself into the leather chair Thomas had given me for our 30th anniversary, running my fingers along the worn armrests where his hands had once rested. On my desk sat framed photographs chronicling a life well lived, Thomas and I on our wedding day, Lily's graduation, family Christmases spent in this very house. Next to them lay a manila envelope, unsealed, waiting. I'd prepared it weeks ago when I first noticed the Hamiltons' cars parked outside too frequently, when hushed conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lily. "Mom, the Hamiltons have connections to get you into Shady Pines retirement community. It's for the best. You can't maintain this property anymore. Be reasonable." Reasonable. The word nearly made me laugh. Was it reasonable to expect your mother to hand over a $3 million beachfront property to your husband's family at a fraction of its value? Was it reasonable to plan my institutional containment while I was still independent? Was it reasonable to forget who had paid for her education, her first car, her lavish wedding just 3 years ago? I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my bank accounts, still healthy despite my generosity toward my only child. I checked my investment portfolio, diversified and strong. I checked my calendar, lunch tomorrow with Diane, my attorney of 40 years, already scheduled. The noise from the deck grew louder. I could hear Marcus's mother, Virginia, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, loudly discussing the tasteful renovations they'd make to update this tired old place. I heard Lily laugh in agreement, the same laugh that once delighted me when she was small. I pulled out the folder I kept in my desk drawer. Inside were 30 years of documents I'd saved meticulously, property deeds, tax records, trusts, and amendments. The beach house had never been just a house to me. It represented freedom after years of struggling as a single mother before I met Thomas. It was the first significant thing I had ever purchased entirely on my own, before Thomas and I merged our lives. The deed bore only my name, Eleanor Grace Mitchell. The Hamiltons believed they were acquiring a prime piece of real estate through my naive daughter. They thought a 72-year-old widow would be easily manipulated, worn down, or guilted into compliance. They saw my cane and gray hair and assumed my mind had grown equally frail. I closed my eyes and listened to the waves crash against the shore below. This beach had witnessed my triumphs and sorrows. It had seen me type the end on manuscripts that would later sit on bestseller lists. It had watched me scatter some of Thomas's ashes 4 years ago, keeping my promise to let part of him remain forever with his beloved ocean. The deck door slid open, and footsteps approached my study. I didn't turn around. "Mom," Lily's voice came tentatively. "We need to discuss the paperwork. Judge Hamilton's brought the transfer documents. We can do this the easy way." I swiveled my chair slowly, facing my daughter. She looked so much like me at that age, the same chestnut hair, the same determined set of the jaw. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost something essential. Perhaps it was the years in college I'd paid for, perhaps it was marrying into money, or perhaps it was simply the self-centered callousness that sometimes comes with youth. "What exactly would be the easy way, Lily?" I asked quietly. "Just sign the papers." "They've already drawn everything up," she said, holding out a leather portfolio. "The Hamiltons are offering you 20% above what you paid for this place. Plus guaranteed placement at Shady Pines." "And what do they plan to do with this tired old place?" I asked, intentionally echoing Virginia's words. Lily had the decency to flush slightly. "They're going to keep it in the family. Maybe rent it out during the off-season." "By family, you mean their family?" "Well, I'm part of their family now, Mom," she said, exasperation coloring her voice. "And what about our family? The one you were born into?" She sighed dramatically. "You're being difficult. This is a generous offer. The Hamiltons don't need to do this." "Do what exactly? Take my home at a fraction of its market value?" "You're right, they don't need to do that." "Mom, be realistic. You can't manage these stairs with your hip. The property taxes alone eat up half your income. This place is too much for one person." I smiled, but it wasn't the smile she was used to. This wasn't the indulgent smile of a mother who would eventually give in. This was the smile of a woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, and breast cancer. This was the smile of someone who recognized a poorly disguised land grab when she saw one. "I'll consider it," I said, taking the portfolio without opening it. Relief flooded her face. "Great. They're hoping to finalize everything this week." "I didn't say I'd sign it," I clarified. "I said I'd consider it. I have lunch with Diane tomorrow." Her face fell at the mention of my attorney. "Why involve lawyers? This is family." "Yes," I said pointedly. "It certainly is." After she left, I opened the portfolio. The generous offer was spelled out in black and white, a purchase price that might have been fair 20 years ago, but was now less than a third of the property's actual value. The document included clauses that would have me vacate within 30 days, sign away all rights to contest the sale, and release the Hamiltons from any future claims. I set it aside and reached for my phone, typing a text to Diane, "Meeting tomorrow even more important than we thought. Bringing documents. Plan B may be necessary." Her response came quickly, "Suspected as much. Don't sign anything. I'll bring the trust paperwork." I slept poorly that night, listening to the waves and thinking about Lily. Where had I gone wrong? How had my bright, compassionate child turned into someone who would conspire to displace her own mother? I thought about Thomas and what he would say if he were here. Probably something practical like, "People show you who they are. Believe them the first time." Morning came with the clarity that dawn often brings. I dressed carefully in a linen suit I'd bought in Milan the year before, applied my makeup with precision, and secured my silver hair in a neat chignon. If the Hamiltons expected a shuffling old woman in a housecoat, they were in for a surprise. I made coffee and carried my mug out to the deck. The morning was glorious, as summer mornings on the Cape often are, the sky a brilliant blue, the ocean a deeper shade spreading to the horizon. A family was already setting up on the beach below, children running with buckets and shovels. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The sliding door opened, and Lily emerged, still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "You're up early," she commented, helping herself to my coffee. "I've always been an early riser. You know that." She glanced at my attire. "Why are you so dressed up? Lunch with Diane, remember?" She frowned. About that. Judge Hamilton thinks it would be better if we handled this without outside counsel. He's willing to have their family lawyer revise any terms you're uncomfortable with. I almost laughed at the transparency of it. I'm sure he is. Mom, why are you being so difficult? This is a good solution for everyone. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the ocean fill the silence between us. Is it? How exactly does my losing my home benefit me? You're not losing anything. You're downsizing to a place that can care for you properly. And the Hamiltons just happen to get prime oceanfront property at a steep discount. How convenient. It's not like that, she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. Then what is it like, Lily? Explain it to me. She set down her mug with unnecessary force. You know what? I'm not having this conversation. The offer is more than fair. Judge Hamilton has already pulled strings to get you into Shady Pines ahead of their waiting list. Most people would be grateful. I'm not most people. And this isn't most properties. She made a sound of frustration. This is exactly why we need to take over. You're not thinking clearly. This house is a burden you can't afford. I raised an eyebrow. Can't afford? That's interesting. I wasn't aware you had access to my financial statements. Her cheeks flushed. I've seen the property tax bills. And the maintenance costs. The new roof last year almost wiped out your savings. So she'd been going through my mail. Interesting. My finances are not your concern, I said quietly. They haven't been since you decided to drop out of medical school to marry Marcus. That hit a nerve. That's not fair. You know I wasn't happy in medical school. No, what's not fair is expecting me to hand over my home because your in-laws want a summer place they can't otherwise afford. She stood abruptly. This is pointless. The Hamiltons are coming at 2. Try to be reasonable by then. She stormed back inside, sliding the door with enough force to rattle the glass. I remained on the deck, watching the ocean and thinking about the meeting to come. At 11, I drove my perfectly maintained Volvo into town, parking in front of Diane's law office. The colonial building housed the practice she'd built over 4 decades, specializing in estate law and elder advocacy. Diane was waiting for me at the door, elegant in her 70s, with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen every trick in the book. Eleanor, she greeted me with a quick embrace. You look ready for battle. Is that what this is? I asked as she ushered me inside. From what you've told me, absolutely. The classic family property grab, with a side of elder manipulation. Did you bring the documents? I handed her the portfolio. She scanned them quickly, her expression darkening with each page. This is worse than I thought, she said finally. They're not just lowballing you, they're trying to strip you of all rights to contest after the fact. And this Shady Pines clause? They're not even guaranteeing permanent placement. Just assistance in securing placement. Which means they could wash their hands of you once the property is theirs. I suspected as much, I said. Well, it's a good thing we've prepared. I've drawn up the trust documents as you requested. Once executed, the beach house will be held in an irrevocable trust, with you as the beneficiary for life. After your death, it transfers according to your wishes, not Lily's or the Hamiltons'. And they can't contest it. They can try, but they won't succeed. You've had multiple medical evaluations confirming your cognitive capacity. You've maintained independent financial control. There's no evidence of coercion or undue influence in establishing the trust. Plus, the trustee is a neutral third party, the bank, not a family member. We spent the next hour reviewing the documents, making a few adjustments, and finalizing the trust. I signed where indicated, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. What about Plan B? I asked as Diane notarized the final page. Already in motion. My investigator friend dug into Judge Hamilton's finances as you requested. The results are illuminating. She slid a folder across the desk. His investment firm is under SEC investigation. They've been quietly freezing his assets. The Hamiltons aren't just looking for a beach house, they're desperately trying to secure assets before everything collapses. I nodded, pieces falling into place. That explains the rush. And their willingness to involve Lily. Exactly. They're using your daughter to access your property before their financial house of cards collapses. I doubt she even knows. Or perhaps she does, I said softly. Perhaps that's why she dropped out of medical school to marry into what she thought was security. Diane's eyes softened. Eleanor, what do you want to do? We can execute the trust and be done with it. Or we can confront them. I thought about Thomas, about the life we'd built, about the daughter we'd raised who now sat across a divide I wasn't sure could be bridged. Both, I said finally. I want both. After finalizing the paperwork, we had lunch at the small bistro overlooking the harbor. Diane and I had been meeting here for decades, through divorces, hers, widowhood, mine, and the challenges of building careers in a world that often underestimated women our age. Are you sure about this approach? She asked over seafood salads. It will likely end your relationship with Lily, at least temporarily. Lily ended our relationship the moment she decided I was an obstacle rather than her mother, I said, surprised by my own clarity. What kind of relationship would we have if I capitulated to this scheme? One based on exploitation and resentment. And if she's being manipulated by the Hamiltons? Then she needs to see them for who they are. Better now than after they've taken everything. Diane nodded, understanding in her eyes. 2:00, you said? Yes. They'll all be there, expecting signatures and champagne. Then I'll arrive at 2:15. Just enough time for them to show their hand. I drove home with a strange calmness. The beach house came into view as I rounded the coastal road, white clapboard gleaming in the afternoon sun, blue shutters vibrant against the clear sky. My home. My haven. My legacy. Several cars already lined the driveway, the Hamiltons' Range Rover, Lily and Marcus's Tesla, and an unfamiliar BMW that likely belonged to their lawyer. I parked and took a moment to compose myself, touching the folder Diane had given me, now securely in my purse alongside the executed trust documents. Inside, voices drifted from the living room, the measured tones of legal discussion, the occasional forced laugh, the clink of glasses. They had started without me. In my own home. I entered quietly, observing the scene. Judge Hamilton stood by the fireplace, one hand casually resting on the mantel where photos of my family, my real family, watched silently. Virginia perched on my sofa, wearing a resort outfit that probably cost more than some people's monthly salary. Marcus lounged nearby, scrolling through his phone, barely bothering to appear interested. A man in an expensive suit stood at the dining table, documents spread before him. And Lily, my Lily, hovered between groups, playing hostess in my house. Mom, she exclaimed, finally noticing me. We were just getting things organized. Come sit down. All eyes turned to me. I saw the calculations happening behind them, how to handle me, how to steer me, how to get what they wanted with minimal resistance. Eleanor, Judge Hamilton stepped forward, hand extended. Glad you could join us. I believe you know everyone except Philip Cranston, our family attorney. I nodded politely but didn't take his hand. Actually, this is still my house, Judge Hamilton. I didn't join you. You're all here at my sufferance. A momentary silence fell. Virginia's smile tightened. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. Mom, Lily said with forced brightness, Mr. Cranston has revised the offer based on our conversation yesterday. They've increased it by another 5%. How generous, I said, setting my purse down and remaining standing. A whole 5% more for a property worth 3 times your offer. Judge Hamilton cleared his throat. Eleanor, property values are subjective. Our offer reflects the work needed to modernize this place. The electrical alone will need a complete overhaul. Funny, I said. The electrical was completely updated last year. By licensed contractors. With permits. The inspection reports are in my filing cabinet. Another silence, more uncomfortable than the first. Well, the judge continued, there's still the roof, the plumbing, new roof 2 years ago. Plumbing redone when I renovated both bathrooms in 2018. I smiled pleasantly. Would you like to try again, Judge? Perhaps you'd like to mention the foundation next? Reinforced last spring. Or maybe the windows. Hurricane rated, installed 5 years ago. Virginia set down her wine glass with a sharp click. There's no need to be defensive, Eleanor. We're trying to help you. Are you? How exactly does relieving me of my multimillion-dollar property at a third of its value help me? Lily stepped forward. Mom, please. You're making this difficult. We're trying to ensure you're taken care of. By putting me in a facility while you all enjoy my beach house? That's not caretaking. That's asset stripping. The lawyer, Cranston, cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, perhaps we could discuss this privately. Sometimes family emotions can complicate straightforward transactions. There's nothing straightforward about this transaction, Mr. Cranston. And I'm not signing anything. Judge Hamilton's pleasant facade cracked slightly. Eleanor, be reasonable. Lily has your best interests at heart. Does she? Or does she have your interests at heart, Judge? How is the SEC investigation going, by the way? Finding it difficult to access your offshore accounts now that they're frozen? The room went deadly silent. Virginia's face drained of color. Marcus suddenly looked alert for the first time. And Judge Hamilton's expression shifted from benevolent patriarch to something much colder. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No? Then perhaps we should discuss it when my attorney arrives. She has the full report from her investigator. Fascinating reading. Especially the part about your firm's misappropriation of client funds. Lily looked between us, confusion evident. What investigation? Dad Hamilton, what is she talking about? Judge Hamilton stared at me, his mask of benevolence completely gone. In its place was the calculating stare of a man used to controlling rooms, used to getting what he wanted. I recognized the expression immediately. It was the same one he'd worn when he first toured my beach house 3 months ago, appraising it like a commodity rather than a home. Whatever information you think you have is patently false, he said, his voice steady but his fingers tapping nervously against the mantel. I would be careful about making defamatory statements, Eleanor. I don't think the SEC considers factual reports defamatory, Judge, I replied calmly. Nor do the 3 clients who filed complaints about missing funds. Marcus stood up abruptly, no longer the languid son-in-law lounging on my furniture. What the hell is going on, Dad? Virginia fluttered her hands nervously. It's nothing, darling. Just a misunderstanding. Is it? Lily asked, her voice uncertain. She turned to her husband's father. Dad Hamilton, what is Mom talking about? The doorbell rang, saving the judge from having to answer immediately. I watched a flash of relief cross his face, quickly replaced by calculation. That would be my attorney, I said pleasantly. Lily moved to answer the door, but I shook my head. This is still my house, Lily. I'll get it. Diane stood on my porch, elegant in her navy suit, leather briefcase in hand. Behind her was a man I recognized as Detective James Colson, a longtime friend of Diane's who had retired from Boston PD to the Cape 5 years ago. He now consulted for financial crimes units across New England. Right on time, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Eleanor, Diane greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. I hope we're not interrupting. Not at all. The Hamiltons were just explaining why their generous offer for my property had nothing to do with the SEC freezing their assets. Detective Colson smiled pleasantly. I do love a good financial discussion. The atmosphere in my living room had transformed completely. Virginia had gone pale, her manicured hand clutching her husband's arm. Marcus looked bewildered, his phone forgotten. The lawyer, Cranston, was hastily gathering papers. And Lily, my Lily, stood apart, her eyes moving from person to person as if seeing them all for the first time. Diane Matheson, my attorney, introduced herself. Eleanor's lawyer for the past 40 years. And James Colson, the detective added. Financial crimes consultant. Former Boston PD, Judge Hamilton drew himself up, summoning the authority that had likely served him well on the bench. This is a private family matter. You have no jurisdiction here, detective. Oh, I'm not here in any official capacity, Colson said easily. Just helping Diane with some research. Fascinating stuff. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, shell companies in Delaware, client funds mysteriously rerouted through various LLCs, he smiled. The SEC is very interested in your creative accounting, Judge Hamilton. Virginia made a small, distressed sound. Marcus turned to his father, his face flushing with anger. Dad, what the hell is going on? What have you done? Judge Hamilton's composure cracked further. Nothing that concerns you. This is a business matter that's been blown out of proportion. Business matter? Detective Colson raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting way to describe misappropriating $4. $2 million of your client's money. The room went silent. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Is that why you want my beach house? I asked quietly. To liquidate your own assets before they're all frozen? To secure property that can't be easily seized? That's ridiculous, the judge sputtered, but his denial lacked conviction. Diane set her briefcase on the dining table, deliberately pushing aside the purchase documents the Hamiltons had prepared. Eleanor, I've finalized the trust paperwork as you requested. The beach house is now legally protected. Neither Lily nor the Hamiltons can touch it. What trust? Lily asked, her voice small. An irrevocable trust, Diane explained, with Eleanor as the lifetime beneficiary. She maintains full use of the property until her death, at which point it transfers according to her wishes, not to whoever pressures her to sign it away. I watched my daughter's face as understanding dawned. For a moment, she looked like the child I remembered, vulnerable, uncertain, stripped of the confident facade she'd adopted since marrying into the Hamilton family. You never intended to sell it to us, she whispered. I never intended to be forced out of my own home, I corrected. There's a difference. Judge Hamilton had recovered enough to attempt damage control. This is all a simple misunderstanding. We were trying to help Eleanor transition to a more manageable living situation. The property discussion was secondary. Diane smiled thinly. Is that why your offer was approximately $2? $1 million below market value? With language stripping Eleanor of all rights to contest after the fact? That seems less like helping and more like exploitation. Virginia stood suddenly. We don't have to listen to this. We came here in good faith. Did you? I asked softly. Was it good faith to send my daughter to convince me to sell my home at a fraction of its worth? Was it good faith to plan how you'd renovate my house while I was still living in it? Was it good faith to assume I'd be too intimidated by a judge to question the terms? Marcus turned to Lily. Did you know about the SEC investigation? Her eyes widened. No. I had no idea. They told me Mom needed to downsize, that they were helping her. By taking her home? Marcus asked, and I saw something shift in his expression, perhaps the first glimmer of independent thought I'd witnessed from him. Virginia looked at her son in shock. Marcus, whose side are you on? I didn't realize there were sides, he replied. I thought we were helping Lily's mother. Judge Hamilton's face had hardened into something ugly. Don't be naive. This was a business opportunity. Eleanor is sitting on a gold mine she can't possibly manage alone. Can I? I asked, leaning slightly on my cane. I've managed it for 30 years. Written 3 bestsellers in the study upstairs. Raised a daughter here. Cared for a dying husband. What exactly about this property exceeds my capabilities? The judge didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to the lawyer. Cranston, pack up. We're done here. The attorney nodded, clearly relieved to escape the tension. He shoved papers into his briefcase haphazardly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Eleanor," Judge Hamilton said, his voice clipped, "you're making a serious mistake. Our offer was more than generous considering the circumstances." "The circumstances being your imminent financial collapse?" Detective Coulson asked pleasantly. "Yes, very generous of you to try to secure assets before everything freezes." Virginia grabbed her purse, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "We don't have to stand here and be insulted. Marcus, we're leaving." Marcus hesitated, looking between his parents and Lily. I think I'll stay. I want to understand what's happening." Virginia's eyes widened in shock. "Marcus." "I'll catch up later, Mom," he said firmly. Judge Hamilton looked at his son with cold disappointment. "Do what you want. We'll discuss this at home." He turned to me, all pretense of friendliness gone. "This isn't over, Eleanor." "Actually, it is," Diane interjected. "The trust is executed and filed. The property is legally protected. And Detective Coulson has shared his findings with the SEC's Boston office. I'd focus on your legal defense, Judge, not on Eleanor's beach house." The judge's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He steered his wife toward the door, the lawyer trailing behind them. The sound of car doors slamming followed moments later, then the angry rev of an engine as they drove away. The living room fell into uncomfortable silence. Lily stood near the window, arms wrapped around herself. Marcus sat heavily on the sofa, running his hands through his hair. Detective Coulson excused himself tactfully, saying he had a call to make, and stepped onto the deck. Diane looked at me questioningly. I nodded, and she gathered her papers. "I'll be in touch, Eleanor. The trust documentation is on the table if you want to review it again." After she left, the three of us remained, me, my daughter, and her husband, strangers now in a house filled with memories. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily finally asked, her voice small. "Tell you what? That I suspected your in-laws were trying to take advantage of me? Would you have believed me?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "How long have you known about their financial problems?" I asked instead. "I didn't," she insisted. "They never said anything. They just mentioned that this property was too much for you, that they could help you downsize while keeping the house and the family." "Their family," I clarified. "Not ours." Marcus looked up. "I didn't know either, Mrs. Mitchell. About any of it. The SEC investigation, the real estate scheme, they just told me it would be good for Lily to have her childhood home." I studied him, trying to see past the polished exterior to whatever lay beneath. Was he truly ignorant, or just a better actor than his parents? "You never questioned why they wanted this specific property? Why they were willing to uproot an elderly widow from her home of 30 years? He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't think about it that way. They presented it as helping you. By putting me in a facility and taking my home? That's an interesting definition of help." Lily wiped at her eyes. I really thought it was for the best, Mom. They said you couldn't manage the stairs with your hip, that the property taxes were draining your savings, that you were too proud to admit you needed help. And you believed them without ever asking me? The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. "After everything we've been through together, you took their word over even having a conversation with your own mother?" She looked away. "They're Marcus's family. I trusted them." "More than you trusted me," I said softly. The truth of it hung in the air between us. Somewhere outside, a gull cried, the sound carrying on the sea breeze through the open windows. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to our human dramas. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. "Now?" I settled into my favorite chair, feeling suddenly tired. "Now I continue living in my home. And you both figure out what your next move will be, considering your father-in-law is likely facing federal charges." Lily's head snapped up. "You can't be serious." Detective Coulson seemed quite serious about the $4. $2 million in misappropriated funds. But what about us? Where will we go if they freeze their assets? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become this person who valued security over integrity? Who would conspire against her own mother for financial gain? Had the seeds always been there, or had I simply failed to see them growing? That's not my problem to solve, Lily, I said gently. You're an adult. You made choices. Now you live with them. How can you say that? I'm your daughter. Yes, you are. The same daughter who stood in this very room and told me I'd never get this beach house. The same daughter who was willing to see me institutionalized so her in-laws could have a vacation property. She flinched as her own words came back to her. Marcus stood up. Mrs. Mitchell, I want to apologize. I should have asked more questions. I shouldn't have assumed my parents had everyone's best interests at heart. His apology seemed sincere, but it changed nothing. Thank you, Marcus. But apologies don't erase actions. We were counting on this, Lily said, her voice trembling. We were going to live here part of the year. We had plans. Plans that involved taking advantage of me, I pointed out. Plans built on someone else's property, someone else's life work. But you'll die someday, she blurted, then covered her mouth, shocked at her own words. The room went silent. Even the ocean seemed to pause. Yes, Lily, I will die someday. As will you. As will everyone. But I'm not dead yet, and this is still my home. I let my gaze travel around the room, taking in the space I had lovingly maintained for 3 decades. When I die, this house will go to whoever I designate in my will. Given your actions today, you might want to reconsider your expectations. Her face crumpled. Are you disinheriting me? I haven't decided yet. But I am asking you both to leave. I need time to think, and you clearly need time to reassess your situation. Marcus nodded and stood. Come on, Lily. Let's go. She didn't move immediately, her eyes pleading with me. Mom, please. Where are we supposed to go? You have your own home, don't you? The condo your in-laws helped you buy. But if their assets are frozen, then you'll figure something out. You're resourceful, Lily. You always have been. Reluctantly, she allowed Marcus to guide her toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Is this it? After everything, you're just cutting me out? I sighed, feeling the weight of my years, the accumulation of love and disappointment. I'm not cutting you out, Lily. I'm setting a boundary. There's a difference. When you're ready to have an honest conversation, without schemes or manipulations, I'll be here. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, listening to the waves break on the shore below. 30 years of memories surrounded me, Lily learning to swim in the ocean, Thomas grilling on the deck, countless sunrises watched from my bedroom window, storms weathered, joys celebrated. I picked up the trust documents Diane had left, running my fingers over the official language that had protected my home. Then I reached for the folder Detective Coulson had compiled on the Hamiltons' financial misdeeds. The evidence was damning: years of creative accounting, client funds diverted to personal use, a house of cards that had finally begun to collapse. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. All good? Need company? I typed back, I'm fine. We'll call tomorrow to discuss next steps. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the water with stripes of gold and orange. I made my way slowly to the deck, settling into the chair where I watched countless sunsets. For the first time in weeks, I breathed easily. My home was secure. The truth was out. The future remained uncertain, especially regarding my relationship with Lily, but at least it would be built on honesty rather than exploitation. As darkness gathered, I thought about the morning's confrontation and the words I'd said to my daughter. Not in anger, not in retaliation, but in truth, I'll be here when you're ready for an honest conversation. Sometimes love means standing firm. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to be taken advantage of, even by those you hold dear. These weren't easy lessons, not for me, and certainly not for Lily, but they were necessary ones. The stars began to appear, pinpricks of light against the deepening blue. I thought about Thomas, about what he would say if he were here. Probably something straightforward like, "You did the right thing, Ellie." Hard, but right. I smiled at the memory of his voice, so clear I could almost hear it on the evening breeze. Then I went inside, locked the doors to my home, and carried the trust documents upstairs to place in my safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Hamiltons wouldn't give up easily. Lily might choose her in-laws over reconciliation. The legal battles might just be beginning. But tonight, I had won the first and most important victory. I had refused to be a victim. I had protected what was mine. I had spoken truth to power. And in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my property, but my power. Morning arrived with the clarity that dawn often brings at the beach, the light different somehow, cleaner, as if the world had been scrubbed new overnight. I woke early, as was my habit, and made coffee in the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals over the decades. The events of the previous day seemed almost dreamlike now, though the trust documents in my safe and the absence of the Hamiltons' cars in my driveway confirmed their reality. I carried my coffee to the deck, settling into the routine that had sustained me through grief and joy alike. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane: "Judge Hamilton's assets officially frozen this morning. SEC moved faster than expected. Might want to prepare for fallout." I wasn't surprised. The evidence Detective Colson had gathered was compelling, and financial crimes units moved quickly when millions were at stake. I typed back, "Thanks for the heads up. We'll be ready." The ocean spread before me, constant in its changes. Today it was a deep, clear blue, gentle waves rolling onto the shore where a few early morning walkers strolled with dogs. This view, this peace, was what the Hamiltons had tried to take from me, not just property, but perspective. My phone rang just after 10. Diane's name flashed on the screen. "Eleanor," she said, skipping pleasantries, "turn on Channel 5. They're reporting on Hamilton." I found the remote and switched on the television I rarely used. A somber newscaster stood outside a courthouse I recognized in Boston. Allegations of fraud and misappropriation of client funds. Judge William Hamilton, who served on the bench for 22 years before retiring to establish Hamilton Investment Group, has been taken into custody following an SEC investigation. Sources say millions of dollars are unaccounted for. I watched in silence as they showed footage of the judge being escorted into the courthouse, his face grim, Virginia trailing behind him looking shell-shocked. The reporter continued, detailing the charges and the potential penalties, which included significant jail time. "It's happening faster than I expected," Diane said in my ear. "Will they come after the beach house?" I asked. "No. First, it's protected by the trust now. Second, there was never any actual transfer of ownership. The authorities will focus on assets actually in the Hamiltons' names, their primary residence, vehicles, bank accounts. Those will be frozen pending the investigation." I felt no satisfaction watching the Hamiltons' public downfall, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. And Lily? Will she be implicated? Not unless she was directly involved in the financial dealings, which seems unlikely. But she and Marcus may face financial fallout if their lifestyle was supported by tainted money. After hanging up, I sat with my thoughts for a long while. The television continued to buzz with updates about the case, but I muted it, preferring the sound of waves outside my window. There was something cleansing about the ocean's rhythm, the constant reminder that human dramas, however painful, are temporary against the backdrop of natural cycles. My doorbell rang shortly after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I hesitated, wondering if it might be reporters. The Hamilton case was breaking news, and it wouldn't take much for journalists to connect me to the story through Lily. When I peered through the peephole, I was surprised to see Marcus standing alone on my porch, looking disheveled in a way I'd never witnessed before. His normally perfect hair was uncombed, his designer clothes replaced by a simple t-shirt and jeans. I opened the door cautiously. "Marcus." Mrs. Mitchell, he said, his voice hoarse. May I come in? Please? I'm not here to cause trouble. I studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. He entered, his shoulders hunched, looking nothing like the confident young man who had stood in the same spot yesterday, expecting to claim my home. I assume you've seen the news, I said, leading him to the living room. He nodded, sinking onto the sofa. They arrested my father this morning. My mother is staying with my sister in Providence. The FBI sealed our house. And Lily? She's at our condo. She didn't want to come. Said you wouldn't want to see her. I sat across from him, my cane propped against the chair. I'm surprised you wanted to see me, considering yesterday's events. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me suddenly of how young he still was, barely 30, thrust into a crisis not of his own making, though certainly one he'd been complicit in. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't just tell me what I wanted to hear. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. All my life, that's what everyone's done. Told me what I wanted to hear. That I was special, that the rules didn't apply to me, that I deserved whatever I wanted simply because I was Judge Hamilton's son. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Yesterday, when Detective Coulson outlined what my father had done, it was like seeing my whole life clearly for the first time. The trips we took that clients paid for without knowing. The college tuition that came from business expenses. The way my father always had a solution, always knew someone who could make problems disappear. He looked around my living room, at the photographs, the bookshelves filled with well-loved volumes, the evidence of a life built honestly, step by step. I've never built anything, he said quietly. I've never earned anything. Everything I had, was given to me, and now I find out it wasn't even ours to give. An unexpected compassion stirred in me. Not forgiveness, it was too soon for that, but recognition of a human being in pain, trying to make sense of a world suddenly turned upside down. Why are you telling me this, Marcus? Because you stood your ground. You didn't let us intimidate you. You protected what was yours. He swallowed hard. I need to know how to do that, how to stand on my own when everything around me is collapsing. It was perhaps the last thing I'd expected from this visit, not accusations or demands, but a request for guidance. The first step, I said carefully, is taking responsibility for your own actions, not just your father's crimes. He nodded. I know. I was part of it, the plan to take your house. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know the answers. I just wanted the beach house, the prestige, the lifestyle. And Lily? Where does she fit into this realization? His expression grew troubled. She's devastated. Confused. Angry. At her parents, at mine, at herself. She keeps saying she just wanted to take care of you, that she really thought she was doing the right thing. I felt a familiar ache at the mention of my daughter. And what do you think? Was she trying to help me, or help herself to my property? Both, I think. She genuinely worried about you living alone with your hip condition. But we also, wanted the house. The location. The status of having oceanfront property. He looked down at his hands. We never considered what it would mean to take it from you. Outside, gulls cried and circled, their calls carrying through the open windows. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking time in a world that had changed irrevocably for all of us. What will you do now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. Our accounts are frozen. The condo might be seized if it was purchased with tainted money. My job at my father's firm is obviously gone. I have a law degree I barely earned and no real experience. You're young, I said. You can start over. How? The question came out as a plea. How do you start over when everything you thought you knew turns out to be a lie? I considered his question, thinking about the times in my own life when I'd faced devastating change, when Thomas died, when my first novel was rejected by 12 publishers, when I discovered I needed hip surgery and wouldn't be able to walk without assistance for months. You start with the truth, I said finally. Not the story you wish were true, but the reality as it is. You take inventory of what remains, your health, your education, your relationships that survive the crisis. And then you build, one small decision at a time. That simple, huh? There was a hint of the old Marcus in his sarcasm. No, I replied. Not simple at all. Probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But necessary. He nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered book. I found this at our condo last night. Lily had it in her desk drawer. He handed it to me. It was a poetry chapbook I'd published 20 years ago, a limited edition of only 200 copies. Inside the cover, I'd written, "For Lily, may you always find your own voice as clearly as you've helped me find mine. Love, Mom." She's read it so many times the spine is falling apart, Marcus said. There are passages underlined, notes in the margins. She's kept it all these years. I ran my fingers over the faded cover, remembering the woman I'd been when I wrote these poems, younger, navigating motherhood and ambition, trying to find language for experiences that felt beyond words. She still loves you, Marcus said quietly. Whatever else has happened, that's true. I closed the book gently. Love isn't always enough, Marcus. Trust matters. Respect matters. I know. But it's somewhere to start, isn't it? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lily. Is Marcus with you? Please tell him to call me. I showed him the message. She's worried about you. I'll call her, he said, standing. Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Mitchell. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry for my part in all this. I nodded, accepting his apology without yet offering forgiveness. What will you tell Lily? The truth. That I came to apologize. That we need to figure out our next steps together, without my parents' influence or money. He hesitated. And that you're a remarkable woman who deserved better from both of us. After he left, I sat with the chapbook in my hands, remembering the year I'd written it, the summer Lily turned 12, when she'd sit on this very deck watching me work, asking thoughtful questions about metaphors and line breaks. Where had that curious, compassionate girl gone? Was she still there, beneath the layers of entitlement and poor choices? I made myself lunch, a simple sandwich eaten at the kitchen counter where I'd prepared countless meals. The house felt different somehow, as if yesterday's confrontation had shifted something fundamental in its character. Not damaged it, but transformed it, like beach glass, made more beautiful by weathering a storm. In the afternoon, I worked on my current manuscript, a historical novel set in 1920s Boston. Writing had always been my refuge, the place where I could make sense of a chaotic world by arranging it into narrative. Today, the words came slowly but steadily, each sentence a small victory over the emotional tumult of recent days. Around 4, my phone rang again. Lily's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for several rings, uncertain whether I was ready for this conversation. Finally, I answered. Mom. Her voice was small, tentative in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child waking from a nightmare. Can I come over? Please? Just to talk. I hesitated, weighing my need for boundaries against the possibility of reconciliation. Just you? No Marcus? Just me. All right, I said. I'll put on some tea. She arrived 30 minutes later, knocking softly rather than using her key, a small acknowledgement that she no longer took access to my home for granted. When I opened the door, I was struck by how different she looked from yesterday, the designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, her face free of makeup and marked by tears. Mom, she said, and then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. I stepped back. Come in. The tea's ready. We moved to the kitchen in silence. I poured 2 cups of Earl Grey, added a splash of milk to hers the way she'd always liked it, and set them on the table where we'd shared countless conversations over the years. I've made a terrible mistake, she said finally, her hands wrapped around the mug as if seeking warmth. Many mistakes. Yes, I agreed, not unkindly. You have. I don't even know where to begin. To apologize, to explain, none of it seems adequate. I sipped my tea, giving her space to find her words. Outside, the afternoon light cast long shadows across the deck, the ocean beyond a deep, metallic blue. When I married Marcus, she said slowly, I thought I was entering a world of security and certainty. The Hamiltons seemed so solid. Judge Hamilton had this aura of authority, of unquestionable rightness. It was seductive. More seductive than medical school. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. She winced. I was struggling in med school. More than I ever let you know. The competition, the pressure, the endless hours of study. I started having panic attacks, doubting whether I was cut out for it. When I met Marcus, his world seemed so much easier. Decisions were made for you. Paths were cleared ahead of time. By his father's influence, I pointed out. Yes. I see that now. She set down her mug. When they first suggested helping you downsize, it didn't seem predatory. They framed it as a way to secure your future while keeping the beach house in the family. It wasn't until they drafted those documents, with terms so clearly one-sided, that I started to have doubts. But you didn't act on those doubts, I said. You didn't warn me. You didn't ask questions. You showed up with them, expecting me to sign away my home. I know. Tears filled her eyes. I convinced myself it was for your own good. That you were too stubborn to admit you needed help. That the stairs were too much for your hip, the maintenance too costly on your fixed income. Did you ever once ask me if I was struggling? If I needed help? She shook her head, a tear spilling onto her cheek. No. Because I was afraid of the answer. Afraid you'd say you were fine, and then I'd have to confront the truth about what we were doing. The honesty of her admission caught me off guard. I had expected denials, justifications, attempts to shift blame. Not this raw acknowledgement of her own failings. When did you learn about Judge Hamilton's legal troubles? I asked. This morning, when the FBI came to their house. Marcus called me, absolutely shattered. She looked up, her eyes red. Mom, I swear I had no idea. If I'd known they were using us to secure assets before everything collapsed. Would it have changed anything? I asked quietly. If they weren't facing legal trouble, if it was just about taking advantage of me for a prime piece of real estate, would you have still gone along with it? She didn't answer immediately, and I respected her for taking the time to consider honestly rather than rushing to proclaim her innocence. I don't know, she finally said. And that terrifies me. That I might have continued down that path, might have been willing to hurt you for what I wanted. Her voice broke. What kind of person does that make me? A human one, I said after a moment. Flawed. Capable of terrible mistakes. But also capable of growth, if you choose it. Hope flickered across her face. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I don't know yet, I answered truthfully. Forgiveness isn't something I can promise in advance. It's a process, not an event. And it depends as much on your actions going forward as on my capacity to heal. She nodded, accepting this without protest. That's fair. More than fair, considering what I did. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our tea, listening to the waves below. The familiar sound had soothed both of us through countless difficulties over the years, my struggles with writer's block, her teenage heartbreaks, our shared grief when Thomas died. What will you and Marcus do now? I asked eventually. We don't know. The condo might be seized. Our accounts are frozen. Marcus is talking about applying for public defender positions, actual legal work, not the cushy consulting job his father arranged for him. She managed a small, sad smile. I might go back to school. Not medicine, but maybe nursing or physician assistant training. Something in healthcare where I can actually help people. That sounds like a good start. We'll have to move somewhere cheaper. Start over with nothing but student loans and a crashed reputation. She looked around the kitchen, her gaze lingering on the worn wooden table where we sat. I always took this place for granted, you know. Assumed it would be mine someday, without considering what it meant to you, what you sacrificed to keep it. This house represents freedom to me, I said. Financial independence. Creative space. Memories of your father. It's not just real estate. I understand that now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key, her key to my house, and placed it on the table between us. This doesn't belong to me anymore. Not until I earn back the right to have it. The gesture touched me more deeply than I expected. Not because I needed her to return the key, but because she recognized the symbolic importance of doing so, of acknowledging boundaries, of respecting my autonomy. Thank you, I said simply. She glanced at her watch. I should go. Marcus and I are meeting with a financial advisor at 5 to figure out if we have anything left. I nodded, rising from the table. As we walked to the door, I felt the weight of unspoken words between us, not just recriminations, but memories, shared experiences, the complex history of mother and daughter. At the threshold, she turned to me, her expression vulnerable. Can I call you? Not to ask for anything, just to talk. I considered her request. Part of me wanted to protect myself from further hurt, to maintain strict boundaries until I was certain she had changed. But another part recognized the courage it had taken for her to come here today, to admit her mistakes without excuses. Yes, I said finally. You can call. I may not always answer right away, but I will call you back. Relief washed over her face. Thank you, Mom. As she turned to go, I remembered something. Lily, wait. I went to the living room and retrieved the poetry chapbook Marcus had brought earlier. You might want this back. She took it gently, her fingers tracing the worn cover. You saw the notes I wrote in the margins? All those underlined passages? I nodded. Even when I was at my worst, most selfish, most entitled, I kept this. Read it when I felt lost. Her voice softened. Your words always brought me back to myself. The self I want to be, not the one I've been lately. After she left, I returned to the deck, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The confrontation with the Hamiltons was over, but its consequences would ripple through all our lives for years to come. Lily and Marcus faced a difficult road ahead, financial uncertainty, legal complications, the painful process of rebuilding their lives without the privilege they'd come to expect. As for me, I had protected what was mine, but at what cost? The relationship with my daughter was damaged, perhaps irreparably. Only time would tell whether today's tentative steps toward reconciliation would lead to genuine healing or merely a polite détente. The sun touched the water, setting the waves ablaze with gold and orange. I thought about the nature of forgiveness, not as a gift bestowed from on high, but as a path walked one step at a time, with many missteps and backward glances along the way. Perhaps that's why I would tell Lily when she called, that forgiveness, like love, isn't something you can demand or expect. It must be earned through consistent action, through the slow rebuilding of trust, through the willingness to face uncomfortable truths without flinching. As darkness gathered, I made my way inside, closing the sliding door against the evening chill. The house embraced me, solid and unchanging, a testament to the life I'd built through years of hard work and careful choices. Whatever happened next, with Lily, with the Hamiltons, with the uncertain future that stretched before us all, this much was certain: I had stood my ground. I had refused to be manipulated or intimidated. I had protected not just my property, but my dignity. And in doing so, I had perhaps shown my daughter a different kind of strength than she had witnessed before, not the strength of unchecked ambition or material acquisition, but the quiet, unshakable power of a woman who knows her own worth and refuses to compromise it. 3 months passed, each day etching a new pattern into the shifting landscape of our lives. Autumn arrived with its particular brand of beauty on Cape Cod, the crowds thinning, the light turning golden, the ocean deeper blue against skies of impossible clarity. I watched the transformation from my deck each morning, coffee in hand, the weight of summer's events gradually settling into something I could carry. The Hamilton story had dominated local news for weeks. Judge Hamilton now faced federal charges of wire fraud, misappropriation of client funds, and tax evasion. Virginia had filed for divorce, a tactical move her lawyers likely recommended to protect whatever assets might be salvaged. Their mansion had been seized, their social standing destroyed. I took no pleasure in their downfall. There is something profoundly sad about watching a life built on deception crumble, even when that deception had targeted me. In quiet moments, I wondered what pressures and fears had driven a respected judge to risk everything, his career, his freedom, his family, for money he didn't truly need. Lily called every Sunday afternoon, our conversations gradually evolving from stilted politeness to something approaching honesty. She and Marcus had moved from their luxury condo to a modest apartment in a neighboring town. Marcus had secured a position with the public defender's office, entry-level work far below his previous salary but offering something his father's connections never had, the chance to earn respect on his own merits. Lily had surprised me by enrolling in a physician assistant program, returning to her original dream of working in medicine, albeit by a different path. "I'm starting over," she told me during one call. "And it's terrifying. But also, freeing. I'm not trying to live up to anyone's expectations anymore. Just trying to build something real." On a crisp October morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I answered, I found Lily standing on my porch, a canvas tote bag over her shoulder, her expression tentative but determined. "I brought breakfast," she said, holding up the bag. "If you're free." I studied her for a moment, the daughter who had tried to take my home, who had aligned herself with those who sought to exploit me, who had chosen status over integrity. But I also saw the child I'd raised, the woman struggling to find her way back to herself after losing everything she thought mattered. "I'm free," I said, stepping aside to let her in. She moved through the house with careful respect, no longer assuming ownership or entitlement. In the kitchen, she unpacked fresh croissants, a container of berries, 2 small jars of homemade jam. "I made the jam myself," she said, arranging everything on plates. "Marcus's grandmother taught me how. She's the only one from his family still speaking to us." "Is it difficult?" I asked. "Being ostracized by them?" Lily considered this as she poured coffee into mugs. "Sometimes. I got used to belonging to something that seemed impressive. Important. The Hamilton name opened doors." She handed me a mug. But the doors it opened led to rooms I'm not sure I wanted to be in. We carried our breakfast to the deck, settling into the chairs where we'd shared countless conversations over the years. The ocean spread before us, whitecaps dotting the surface under the October wind. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did it," Lily said suddenly. "Why I went along with their plan to take your house. It wasn't just about wanting the property, though that was part of it." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I think I was trying to prove something. To them, to you, to myself." She looked out at the ocean, her profile so like mine at that age it made my heart ache. That I belonged in their world. That I could be as ruthless and entitled as they were. That I wasn't just the scholarship kid who married into money. "You never needed to prove anything to me," I said quietly. "I know that now. But I think I resented you for a long time without realizing it." She turned to me, her expression open and vulnerable. "You built all this yourself. The house, your career, your independence. You never needed anyone to rescue you or provide for you. And I took shortcuts. Abandoned medical school when it got hard. Married into wealth instead of creating my own." The insight surprised me, not because it wasn't true, but because I hadn't realized she saw me that way. "My path wasn't easy either, Lily," I reminded her. "I struggled for years before my writing supported us. Your father and I lived paycheck to paycheck when you were small. But you never gave up. You never looked for the easy way out." She smiled sadly. "I think I wanted to prove I could have the same things you had, but faster. Without the work. Without the waiting." The honesty between us felt fragile but precious, like sea glass newly washed ashore. "I'm trying to change," she continued. "To build something real, even if it's smaller and less impressive than what I thought I wanted." "Real is better than impressive," I said. I learned that long ago. We ate in companionable silence for a while, watching gulls wheel and dive over the water. The jam was surprisingly good, raspberry with a hint of lemon, the balance of sweet and tart just right. "There's something else I wanted to talk about," Lily said eventually, setting down her plate. "Marcus and I have been discussing what happens when his father goes to prison. Whether we'll visit, how to maintain boundaries while still showing some compassion." I nodded, understanding the complexity of their position. It made me think about family. About loyalty. About where those boundaries should be. She looked at me directly. "I betrayed you, Mom. I conspired to take your home. I prioritized the Hamiltons' approval over your well-being. How do you even begin to forgive something like that?" The question hung between us, weighted with months of hurt and separation. "I don't know if forgiveness is something you can plan," I said finally. "It's not a destination you arrive at all at once. It's more like a path you walk, one step at a time." "And where are we on that path?" she asked softly. I considered the question seriously, looking inward to gauge my own healing process. "We're walking," I said. "That's what matters." She nodded, accepting this incomplete but honest answer. "There's something I want to show you," I said, rising from my chair. "Wait here." I went to my study and retrieved a document from my desk drawer, a revised version of the trust papers Diane had prepared months ago. I returned to the deck and handed it to Lily. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the legal document with apprehension. "It's the updated trust for the beach house," I explained. The original one protected the property from the Hamilton scheme. This revised version establishes what happens in the future. She began to read, her eyes widening as she understood the implications. "Mom, this says. It says that while I retain lifetime rights to the property, upon my death, it passes to you, with certain conditions." I sat back down, watching her face carefully. "You cannot sell it for profit. You must maintain it as a family home, not an investment property. And if you ever decide you don't want it, it goes to a conservation trust to protect the land from development." Tears filled her eyes. "After everything I did, you're still leaving me the house?" "With strings attached," I pointed out. "Significant ones." "But why?" she asked, genuinely bewildered. "Why trust me with this after what happened?" I looked out at the ocean, gathering my thoughts. "Because despite your mistake, and it was a serious one, you're still my daughter. And because I believe people can change when they confront their failures honestly." "I don't deserve it," she whispered. "Maybe not yet," I agreed. "But the trust doesn't transfer ownership now. It gives you time to become the person who would deserve it." She wiped at her eyes, clutching the document as if it might dissolve in her hands. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just understand that this house has always been about more than property to me. It represents independence, security, creative freedom, all the things I want for you, too. Not handed to you, but earned." Lily looked around, seeing the house through new eyes, not as an asset to acquire, but as a legacy to honor. "I understand," she said. "And I promise, I won't let you down again." "Don't make promises you can't keep," I cautioned. "Just do the work, day by day. Show me who you're becoming, don't just tell me." She nodded, accepting the wisdom in my words. We spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking, about her studies, about Marcus's adjustment to meaningful work, about the small apartment where they were learning to live within their means for the first time. There was a humility to her now that had been missing before, but also a growing confidence that came from facing consequences and surviving them. Around noon, Lily glanced at her watch. "I should go. I have a study group at 1. As we walked to the door, she hesitated, then turned to me. "Would it be okay if I came back next weekend? Maybe helped you prepare the garden for winter? I remember you always plant bulbs in October." The request surprised me, not because she wanted to return, but because she remembered such a small detail of my routine, something I didn't even realize she'd noticed over the years. "I'd like that," I said. "The tulip and daffodil bulbs are already in the garage." She smiled, a genuine smile untainted by the calculation I'd seen in recent years. "I'll be here Saturday morning, then." After she left, I returned to the deck, watching her car disappear down the coastal road. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm below, waves breaking against the shore in patterns that seemed random but were governed by forces as old as the earth itself. I thought about the nature of change, how it resembles the ocean in many ways. Sometimes it comes as a violent storm, upending everything in its path. Sometimes it works slowly, imperceptibly, like water gradually reshaping stone. The Hamiltons' downfall had been a sudden squall, dramatic and devastating. Lily's transformation was proving to be more like the tide, a gradual, sometimes halting process of retreat and advance. The trust document had been a calculated risk. Diane had questioned my decision, worried I was being naive or overly sentimental. "She tried to take this house once," my attorney had reminded me. "Are you sure you want to promise it to her, even with conditions?" I wasn't sure, not entirely. But I also knew that people sometimes need to be offered a glimpse of who they could become before they can grow into that vision. By showing Lily I still believed she could be trustworthy, I was challenging her to prove me right. Winter came, bringing shorter days and spectacular storms that sent waves crashing against the seawall below my property. Lily visited every weekend, sometimes with Marcus, sometimes alone. We planted bulbs, winterized the garden, repainted the guest bathroom, organized decades of photographs into albums. Small tasks that rebuilt connection through shared purpose. Marcus surprised me by revealing a talent for carpentry, repairing loose boards on the deck and building a new set of bookshelves for my study. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a carpenter, he explained one Saturday as he sanded the edges of a shelf. Before I was expected to become a lawyer, I spent summers helping in his workshop. "You're good at it," I observed, watching his careful, precise movements. "Better than at practicing law, from what Lily tells me." He laughed, without defensiveness. "She's right. I was a terrible lawyer, entitled, lazy, expecting things to be handed to me." He ran his hand over the smooth wood. "This is different. You can't fake craftsmanship. The results speak for themselves." I nodded, understanding what he meant. There's honesty in working with your hands. Though it doesn't care who your father is or what your last name means. Exactly. He looked up at me, his expression earnest. "I'm thinking of apprenticing with a master carpenter in town. Starting over completely." "That takes courage," I said. "Less courage than continuing down a path that was never right for me," he replied. In December, as Christmas approached, Lily called with news. The DA's office offered Judge Hamilton a plea deal. "He'll serve at least 5 years. Her voice was steady, neither vindictive nor overly sympathetic. "Marcus is processing it all. He wants to visit his father before sentencing, to say, not goodbye, exactly, but to establish some boundaries." "And how do you feel about that?" I asked. "I think it's necessary. For closure, if nothing else." She paused. "Mom, we were wondering, would you consider having Christmas dinner here? At our apartment? It's small, and not fancy, but..." "I'd love to," I said, touched by the invitation. On Christmas Eve, I drove to their apartment, bringing a small, carefully chosen selection of gifts. Their building was modest but well-maintained, a far cry from the luxury condo they'd lost. Lily greeted me at the door, wearing an apron dusted with flour, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. "Fair warning," she said as she took my coat, "the turkey might be a disaster. I've never cooked one before." "That's what takeout is for," I replied, making her laugh. Their apartment was small but thoughtfully arranged. A tiny Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with a mismatched collection of ornaments, some I recognized from Lily's childhood, others clearly new and inexpensive. Marcus was setting the table with everyday dishes, no fine china in sight. "Mrs. Mitchell," he greeted me warmly. "Welcome to our humble abode." "Eleanor," I corrected him. "I think we're past formalities at this point." The meal wasn't perfect, the turkey slightly dry, the gravy lumpy, but it was prepared with care and served with genuine hospitality. We ate at their small table, talking easily about Lily's studies, Marcus's carpentry projects, my latest writing endeavors. No mention of the Hamiltons, no shadow of past betrayals. Just a simple family dinner, unpretentious and warm. After dessert, a store-bought pie that no one pretended Lily had made, we exchanged gifts. I opened mine first, a beautifully crafted wooden box, its lid inlaid with a pattern that matched the view from my deck. Marcus made it, Lily explained. I sketched the design, but he did the real work. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. A true gift of talent. They opened mine next, a first edition of a poetry collection we had both loved when Lily was in high school, and a set of professional-grade chisels for Marcus. For your new path, I explained as he examined them with reverent hands. These must have cost a fortune, he said. Good tools are an investment in the future, I replied. My father taught me that. Later, as we sat with coffee in their small living room, Lily asked the question I sensed had been on her mind all evening. Will you tell me about when you bought the beach house? I realize I've never heard the whole story. So I told them, about the years of struggling as a single mother, about the small advances on my early novels that barely covered our expenses, about saving every spare dollar in a dedicated account labeled Freedom Fund. I was 39 when I finally had enough for the down payment, I explained. The house was a wreck then, peeling paint, rotting deck boards, ancient plumbing. But the location was extraordinary, and I knew its potential. You renovated it yourself? Marcus asked. Room by room, year by year, as I could afford it. I learned basic plumbing and electrical work. Taught myself to tile a bathroom. Hired professionals for the big jobs when my books started selling better. Lily looked thoughtful. I remember the house always being under some kind of construction when I was little. I never understood why it mattered so much to you. Because it was mine, I said simply. Earned through my own efforts, not dependent on anyone else's approval or support. In a world that often tells women their security must come from a man or an institution, that house represented true independence. Understanding dawned in her eyes. And I tried to take it from you. You did, I acknowledged. But now you're learning to build your own security, your own independence. That matters more than the house ever could. Spring arrived with its particular magic, crocuses pushing through the soil, light returning to the world minute by minute. The bulbs we'd planted in October emerged in triumphant color, transforming my garden into a celebration of renewal. One especially beautiful April morning, I sat on my deck with coffee, watching the ocean dance under a perfect blue sky. My phone rang, Diane, calling earlier than usual. Eleanor, she said without preamble, I just got word from the prosecutor's office. Judge Hamilton died last night in custody. Apparent heart attack. The news hit me with unexpected force. Not grief, exactly, but a somber recognition of life's fragility and the far-reaching consequences of our choices. Has Marcus been notified? I asked. I believe so. They contacted Virginia first, and she was going to call the children. After hanging up, I sat with the news, watching a sailboat tack across the horizon. The man who had tried to take my home was gone. The legal proceedings would continue against his estate, but he would never serve his sentence, never have the chance to make amends or rebuild what he had destroyed. My phone rang again, Lily this time. Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Did you hear about Dad Hamilton? Yes, Diane just called me. I'm so sorry, Lily. How is Marcus taking it? He's in shock. We both are. She took a shaky breath. Could we come over? I don't think we should be alone right now. Of course. I'll put on a fresh pot of coffee. They arrived an hour later, Marcus looking pale and stunned, Lily supporting him with a steady hand on his back. We sat on the deck, the beauty of the day a stark contrast to the heaviness of the moment. I was going to visit him next week, Marcus said, staring out at the ocean. I had things I wanted to say. Questions I needed to ask. I'm sorry you won't have that chance, I said. He nodded, tears filling his eyes. The weird thing is, I'm not just sad. I'm angry. Angry that he died before facing the consequences. Angry that he left such a mess behind. Angry that I'll never get answers. That's a normal reaction, I assured him. Grief is rarely simple, especially when the relationship was complicated. Lily squeezed his hand. We're going to get through this, she promised. Together. I watched them, these two young people who had tried to take what was mine and who were now building something new from the ruins of their former life. They had lost everything, status, wealth, security, but had gained something more valuable, authenticity, integrity, the knowledge that they could face adversity and emerge stronger. As the day progressed, we walked on the beach, prepared a simple lunch, sat in contemplative silence. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet comfort of being together in a difficult moment. When they prepared to leave in the late afternoon, Lily hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered. For being here. For being you. Always, I promised. Standing on my porch, watching them drive away, I thought about the journey we'd all traveled in the past year. From betrayal to tentative reconciliation. From materialism to meaning. From entitlement to earning. The beach house stood solid behind me, its white clapboard gleaming in the spring sunshine. It had weathered many storms over its long life, literal and metaphorical, and emerged stronger for the battering. Like me. Like Lily, perhaps. Like all of us who choose to face our failures honestly and use them as foundations for something better. I turned and went inside, closing the door gently behind me. The house embraced me, filled with memories of the past and possibilities for the future. My sanctuary. My strength. The home I had built and fought for and refused to surrender. In the end, this wasn't a story about property or inheritance or even family betrayal. It was about knowing your own worth, standing firm in that knowledge, and offering others the chance to recognize it too. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is the opportunity to earn back what was nearly lost, not through grand gestures, but through the patient, humble work of becoming better than we were. I smiled and whispered to the empty room, I am still here. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.